Ramah. And he was there with Samuel, and the place where he was known for like a school for the prophets. Chapter 19 of 1 Samuel. And toward the end of that chapter. And so we know that Saul had sent, just to recap, Saul had sent men to go and take David. And the first group went and they prophesied. The Spirit of the Lord came on them and they started prophesying. So I guess when they felt like they couldn't take David, they went back, and that's how Saul found out. And then the next group, well, I'll send another group. Same thing happens to them. 3 times that happened. 3 times David sees this. At the last, Saul, well, I'm going to do what they can't do. And the Lord showed him. He not only prophesied, but he said, Saul, you're going to take your clothes off when you do it. Lay before the Lord, I guess. And so all those things happened, and I often, as I've read this and meditated on this, I thought, why in the world did he ever leave? We have no way of knowing. We can only speculate. We have nothing that tells us why he left or why he decided to leave. But if he was looking for safety, if he was looking for comfort, what greater way to have your enemies and those who are after you come to church and the Lord moves on them? That ought to tell you, if somebody wants to pick a fight with you, Connor, just tell them, let's go to church. And just pray that the Lord will meet you there. Ron Kaysen used to tell me, he told me when he was a young boy, where they lived at, and I think Ron Kaysen taught this class for a while, didn't he? He may have told you the story. He said he was bullied by this one boy quite a bit there where they lived. And I think it was on a mill village somewhere. And so it just went on for weeks, and obviously you get tired of being bullied. And so that Sunday they had an evangelist who was preaching on David and Goliath. And then David and Goliath, and I think he was also preaching on Samson too. Either way, he said he'd gone to the altar and he felt inspiration how to handle that bully. And so that the next day, as custom was, here comes the bully. He said he got out on the sidewalk and he said he met him. He said, no, you don't want to mess with me. And the bully said, well, why not? And he said, I went to the altar on Sunday, and the Lord touched me, and he said, there was a story the preacher talked about, and the Spirit of the Lord came on David, and he killed Goliath. And the Spirit of the Lord came on Samson. Samson took the line, and Samson done these different things. And he said, if you're not careful, the Lord's going to come on me, and I'm going to jump on you. And so I said, well, how long did that last? He said, it lasted just about a week, and then it started all over again. And so anyway, but I thought often, as I've read this, David, why did you leave Ramah, or Ramah, however you pronounce that, Ramah? And we don't know. We just do not know. So we move on to chapter 20, and we see that David decided he wanted to talk to Jonathan. He wanted to find out. So he had to go back to where Jonathan was, wherever that was. It didn't tell us, but we assumed that it was back where Saul had been, and there in the city. And so Jerusalem, I would think, or somewhere close to there. Anyway, he goes back and finds Jonathan, and he's wanting to talk to Jonathan protection. He just left protection, and he's going to talk to Jonathan about protection. I don't want this to happen. I wish he would quit. I wish Saul would stop. I wish your dad would stop this. Conversation goes on between them, and Jonathan says, I know everything Dad's going to do. there's not a thing that he decides he's going to do. I know about it. David said, you don't know about this. He's out to get me. And so they made a covenant. And if you recall the story, Jonathan had told David, if you'll hide out in the field, I'll take the young man out and I'll shoot an arrow, and as though I'm shooting at a target. And if I say this to the child about trying to retrieve the arrow, then that means it's safe. Everything's okay. But if I say this other phrase, then that means you need to go on. Things are not good. And so that's what happened. That's what happened. And David got the word that he needed to leave and move on. And of course, he and Jonathan were really tight, had come to be really, really close friends. And so he goes on. And then as you move on through chapter 20, about midway in chapter 20, in fact, if you go down toward the end, verse 41, when the boy was gone, it says, David got up from the south side, then he fell on his face to the ground and bowed 3 times. And they kissed each other and wept together, and David wept immeasurably. And so it was a hard pill to swallow. But it was in the last of the last, I guess it seemed like that was the last hope he had. Maybe Jonathan will know, maybe Jonathan will be able to stand in my stead, convince his dad that please don't do this. Why would you do this? David's done these things. The Lord has been on him. But nevertheless, and of course Saul, he gets angry at Jonathan, gets quite angry with him. And so anyway, David went out on his way, and he went and left the area. And so now we have the story in chapter 21 where he goes to Nob. Nob is where comes to Ahimelech, the priest, and is talking to him about, I need some food. And this is the story about him inquiring, and only bread that they had was the bread that was used for worship. And so he was asking for this. An exchange takes place. He basically tells Ahimelech he's on a secret mission. This mission is so secret, I had to leave in such a hurry. I don't have any weapons. Do you have anything here that I can take with me? And he said, well, we have the sword here of Goliath's sword. And it's yours. So he takes the sword. Now I can only imagine what that would be like. That's one thing you certainly could not hide. And I find it interesting that he took it as, I imagine it was quite sized not for him. So who knows? But anyway, he takes these items, he goes on, he sets out, and then he winds up still fleeing from Saul, and he goes to, of all places, he goes to Gath.
Carrying Goliath's sword.
Carrying his sword, where Goliath was a well-known figure, and his 4 brothers still lived there. I don't know why he did that. They arrest him, and after they arrest him, they have him in custody, and they're talking to Achish the king, and when they come and report to him, he says to them in verse 11 of chapter 21, said, "Is this not David, the king of the land?"
How does he know?
Good question. I think his reputation went before him.
But nobody's supposed to know except for the prophet. Saul don't know.
As we don't know that he don't know. Later on, I think Saul reveals to us what's going to happen. I think it's understood. Later on, there's an exchange. In fact, if it hadn't already taken place, oh yeah, it happened earlier. In chapter 20, verse 31, he says, "For as long as the son of," this is Saul talking, For as long as the son of Jesse lives on this earth, and he's talking to Jonathan, neither you nor your kingdom will be established. So, yeah, I'm like you. I thought, well, how does he know he's the king of the land? And then Achish continues to say, did they not sing of this one as they danced, saying, Saul has slain his thousands and David his 10,000s? The king of Achish, his radio apparently picked up the broadcast with what was being sung, and he heard it was the Casey Kasem's top 40 or top 10 countdown, whatever it is, or was. Anyhow, so he knows about this. And then David, I think, at some point realizes this is not a good place to be. It finally dawned on him for whatever reason. He begins to pretend to be a madman. The people of Gath were superstitious. And anybody that seemed to be a lunatic, they were afraid of them. And so therefore, the king says, get him out of here. I don't want him around. So David just done all kinds of crazy things. The scriptures tells us what he does. In fact, we can take a look. I think it's in here, right here at the bottom. David took these words to heart and greatly feared Achish, king of Gath, verse 12, verse 13. So he disguised his sanity while in their sight and acted insanely in their custody. And he scribbled on the doors of the gate and drooled on his beard. Then Achish said to his servants, look, you see the man is behaving like an insane person. Why do you bring him to me? Do I lack insane people? Well, that ought to tell you something. That's not a good thing to have. I've got enough of this. That you have brought this one to behave like an insane person in my presence? Shall this one come into my house? So they let him go. He gets out. He escapes and goes to the cave of Adullam. Interesting story. I wish there was a lot of stuff that we could find out about it, about why he did what he did, but we just have no way of knowing. But either way, we can learn from those things. So if you ever get caught in your enemy's camp, just act crazy. Maybe it'll help you. Then as he's in this cave, he's staying there. Notice in verse 2, this really stood out to me as well. It says, then everyone who was in distress, everyone who was in debt, everyone who was discontented gathered to him, and he became captain over them. It has been suggested that those who were in distress, who were in debt and discontented, this had a connection to Saul. And so as they learn in that area, David's here, his reputation goes before him. We're going to go and be with him. We're going to follow him. We're going to assign ourselves to him. And hopefully he will keep us safe. Hopefully he will fight for us. And then at some point there, Gad, the prophet, came to David and told him not to stay. In fact, he had left his... I love the part that happens after that David went from there to Mizpah of Moab. It says, and he talked to the king of Moab. He had a relationship with the king of Moab for some reason. And he said, please let my father and my mother come and stay with you until I know what God will do for me. So his parents, his family came down to check on him, visit with him. They had some family time. Family time is really important, especially when you're down and out, especially when you don't know which way to turn. Family is extremely important. Or if you don't have family close by, maybe just good friends that you can depend on and trust in, that you can lean on. Gad comes along and talks to David, tells him not to stay in the stronghold, tells him, you need to get to the land of Judah. But at some point, all these things that happened to him, notice it's been suggested, Psalm 142. Let's turn there. I'll get there in a minute. Some of you may already be there on the electronic device. Psalm 142. It's been suggested that this was possibly written in a cave. I cry out with my voice to the Lord. With my voice I implore the Lord for compassion. I pour out my complaint before him. I declare my trouble before him. When my spirit felt weak within me, you knew my path. In the way where I walk, they have hidden a trap for me. Look to the right and see, for there is no one who regards me favorably. There is no escape for me. No one cares for my soul. I cried out to you, Lord. I said, you are my refuge, my portion in the land of the living. Give your attention to my cry, for I have been brought very low. If you're staying in a cave, based on today's standards, certainly you've been brought low. Rescue me from my persecutors, for they are too strong for me. Bring my soul out of prison so that I may give thanks to your name. The righteous will surround me, for you will look after me. And so then we find that as he leaves there, Saul is in pursuit. Obviously, he's still on the move, still trying to find David. And then we have beginning in verse 7, Saul is talking to his servants. And as he's talking to his servants, he's beginning to be very, very suspicious of what's happening around him. And he begins to question his servants. Are you in league with him, or are you in league with me? And so as we read the account, look at verse 8. You can see the mind, you can determine the mind of Saul. For all of you have conspired against me, so that there is no one who informs me. When my son makes a covenant with the son of Jesse, and there is none of you who cares about me, or informs me that my son has stirred up my servant against me to lie in ambush as it is this day. Me. It's all about me. He's doing everything he can to hang on. And so he begins to see, and he knows about the covenant. He's revealed that. He knows about the covenant between Jonathan and David. And then we learn about another character in this group here. Then verse 9, then Doeg the Edomite, who was standing in front of his servants of Saul, responded and said, I saw the son of Jesse coming to Nob, to Ahimelech the son of Ahitub. And he inquired of the Lord for him, gave him provisions, and gave him the sword of Goliath the Philistine. Now, we don't read anywhere in the account where Ahimelech inquired of the Lord. It wasn't recorded if he did it. So I think if he did do it, it would be recorded. So what do we know about this Doeg fellow? He's evil, I believe. He is a descendant of Esau. That's where the name Edomites come from. And so verse 11, we see where the king, he sends messengers, he gets Ahimelech and the priest and those, his household to come there. And in verse 12, Saul is addressing him. He's there with all of his household. He says, listen now, son of Ahitub. And he said, here I am, my lord. Then Saul says to him, verse 13, why have you and the son of Jesse conspired against me, and that you have given him bread and a sword, and have inquired of God for him? so that he would rise up against me by lying in ambush, as it is this day. Verse 14, then Ahimelech answered the king and said, and who among all your servants is as faithful as David, the king's own son-in-law, who is commander over your bodyguard and is honored in your house? Did I just begin to inquire of God for him today? Far be it from me. Do not let the king impute anything against his servant or against any of the household of my father, because your servant knows nothing at all of this whole affair. Now, Ahimelech is trying to make the defense the best he can. Saul don't believe him at all. Verse 16, but the king said, you shall certainly die, Ahimelech, you and all your father's household. Now, Doeg is still there. Now, how in the world, why was Doeg in that place where David was? It's been speculated that he possibly was there to offer sacrifice for himself. He was possibly traveling on the Sabbath. There's a number of reasons that they say, but nothing in particular tells us why he was there. And so he's standing here with all this. He gives an altered report to Saul, which is not correct, doesn't line up with anything that's happened. Saul, being suspicious like he is, he's grabbing a hold of any nugget that he can that gives him the advantage in this situation. So he believes Doeg. He's told Ahimelech, you're going to die, all your house. Now notice this, verse 17. And the king said to the guards who were attending him, turn around and put the priest of the Lord to death, because their hand is also with David, and because they knew that he was fleeing and did not inform me. But the servants of the king were unwilling to reach out with their hands to attack the priests of the Lord. Then the king turns to Doeg. You turn around and attack the priest. And Doeg the Edomite turned around and attacked the priest, and he killed on that day 85 men who wore the linen ephod. He also goes to Nob, the city of the priest, with the edge of the sword, both men and women, children and infants. He also struck oxen, donkeys, and sheep with the edge of the sword. That is an evil man. That is an evil man. But he's acting on the word of King Saul, who is afraid of losing power, who is afraid of losing his position, who is afraid of David, and knows what's going to happen. He's already perceived it. He knows what's going to happen if I don't take out David. Verse 20, but one son of Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub, named Abiathar, escaped and fled to David. Abiathar informed David that Saul had killed the priest of the Lord. Then David said to Abiathar, I knew on that day when Doeg the Edomite was there, talking about Nob, that he would certainly tell Saul, I myself have turned against every person in your father's household. In other words, he's saying, this is my fault that this has happened to your family. I take the blame. And then he says to him, stay with me, do not be afraid, even though he who is seeking my life is seeking your life, for you are safe with me. And then we go to Psalms 52. This psalm was written after the incident of Nob, referring to all the killing, the slaughter that took place. I'll get there in a minute. Psalms 52. Why do you boast in evil, you mighty man? The faithfulness of God endures all day long. Your tongue devises destruction. Like a sharp razor, you worker of deceit. You love evil more than good, lies more than speaking what is right. You love all the words that devour, you deceitful tongue. But God will break you down forever. He will snatch you up and tear you away from your tent, and uproot you from the land of the living. The righteous will see and fear, and they will laugh at him, saying, Behold, the man who would not make God his refuge, but trusted in the abundance of his riches and was strong in his evil desire. But as for me, I am like a green olive tree in the house of God. I trust in the faithfulness of God forever and ever. I will praise you forever because you have done it. I will wait on your name, for it is good in the presence of your godly ones. Now, yeah, that's it. That's the end of that verse. David knows, David sees, David knows the evilness, and we have it recorded how he's talked about Doeg. What a path of destruction Saul is interested in, just to get somebody, just to hurt somebody, just to defame, whatever. You ever had anybody out to get you? Can you recite where the Lord was a shield to you and helped you get out from those situations? Yeah, we've all been there. We've all been there. The Lord will protect. The Lord will guide. And he gives us words to say sometimes in those situations. Sometimes it's just being silent. And another time there's a word that's spoken just at the right time in the right season. And it's our defense. It's our way that the Lord shows up and helps us. The Lord fights for us, if you will. Anyone have something they want to contribute as we wind down to the end of this?
I think we can draw quite a bit of lesson from David's experience, that he was promised that he's going to be the king, and yet the vulnerability that all of us have is being played out by a backslidden king who has so much power and authority. God is mindful of it all, but it wasn't wrong for David to try to escape and avoid it.
No.
I think the enemy comes against every believer at some point or points. And it's a time that can be a motivation for us to draw closer to the Lord or run away. And David did both. He drew closer to the Lord, but he ran to avoid the crisis. And those kinds of things still happen on a smaller scale. I don't reckon we know anybody who's headed to be the king or the president, but the attacks, the devil's still in business. He still goes for it. And we can be increased in our faith if we trust the Lord, if we listen to him and run, if he tells us to run, or make a stand if he tells us to make a stand.
Yes, I love how the Lord shows up sometimes. When I went to work for Dave Gumpton Heating and Air in Henderson, North Carolina, when I was introduced to that heat and air, I had metal work training in the military. And so I was taking those skills into the heat and air, HVAC, and they were working, and I've told this story before, they walked in this morning and said, "You're going to be working with these guys." And they took me into an old building downtown that had been gutted and just had brick, and even the floor had been torn out, just so you had all kinds of rubble and dirt and stuff like you had to walk in. And there was 3 guys on top of 10-foot ladders trying to hook ductwork together. Seemed like to me you'd put the floor in first, but that's just me. Anyway, they were up there and they were cussing. They were, using the Lord's name in vain and everything, and I had never met these guys. They said, "You're going to be working with them," and he leaves and I'm standing there. So I'm watching what they're doing, and I'm seeing that they're having a tough time and swearing and throwing stuff, whatever. And the shortest guy on the crew, one that I worked with later on, we had a wonderful time together. He comes down the ladder, and actually he says from the ladder, he said, "What are you looking at?" Because I'm watching, it's the only show that's going at the time. And he said, "Do you think you can do any better?" And I didn't say nothing. So he comes down the ladder and hands me the hammer. And they were trying to get a drive cleat in and couldn't get it in. That's what they were doing. I know you two heat and air guys know exactly what I'm talking about.
Needed duct stretcher.
He needed one. And they couldn't get it in. And he handed me that hammer, and I took the hammer, and I'd already made up my mind. I was asking the Lord, what do I do in this situation? And he handed me that hammer, and I held it between, so I said, "I can do all things through Christ, which strengtheneth me." Well, that just sucked the wind right out of the room. I went up the ladder. They handed me the drive cleat. The first time, boom, 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 it went right in. I bent the top off. I went back down the ladder. I held it in front of him again. I said, "I can do all things through Christ, which strengtheneth me." And he goes, "All right, let's move on to the next part." The Lord helped me. When I declared the Lord at the bottom, the Lord being with us, when I got to the top, it went in place the very first time. And they had been fighting that thing for 30 minutes or more.
And they were experienced and you weren't.
No. And in fact, I hadn't done duct work at all. Didn't know anything about the duct work. I just knew metal.
Yeah.
And so the Lord shows up.
He showed up and he showed out, didn't he?
He did. I give him the glory for that, all the praise. Well, let's turn to our time of request, prayer request.